In this video, Lucas and I will examine the mythological inaccuracies in the original God of War game. Remember, a few mistakes don't make the game bad. In fact, I believe the classic trilogy is perfect. This is simply entertainment. We're only evaluating the game, not the book, comics, or anything else. So let's start with the main character, Kratos. He's jumping off a mountain that, if I'm not mistaken, is Mount Olympus. I can't show the scene here because YouTube would take it down, but I think everyone already knows it. In Greek mythology, there is actually a Kratos with a C, not a K. And I see a lot of people saying that Kratos and Kratos are the same character, but they're not. In Greek mythology, Kratos is a Titan, a second-generation god after the primordials. He's the son of Styx and Pallas, and the brother of Nike, Zelos, and Bia. Kratos represented strength, power, and sovereign rule, and he did serve as inspiration for the Kratos in the game. However, they are quite different characters. Ironically, the mythological Kratos is one of Zeus's most loyal servants. It's clear, according to Hesiod, that he is part of Zeus's winged forces. There is no home for him without Zeus's home. Kratos and his siblings imprisoned Prometheus. There are rumors of a story that says Kratos would be the replacement for Ares if something happened to the god of war, and that's why Ares himself supposedly imprisoned Kratos in Tartarus. But I say it's a rumor because I've never found the real source of this story, so I don't know if it's true. Kratos, then, would ultimately be a kind of champion of the gods in mythology, very similar to Thor, Marduk, and other characters, as well as Hercules. But besides being a champion, he would mainly be the executor. And in the game, after Kratos jumps, Gaia says that the gods had other plans for him. We start on the boat, but the biggest mistake would be if you didn't like the video. Subscribe, like, and share the video as it took a lot of effort. Also, check out Lucas's channel in the description.
Hey guys, my name is Lucas Franco from the channel Secrets of the World. I also make videos about mythology, and I even have a series where I'm telling the whole story of Greek myths in chronological order. And there's still a lot more to tell, but alright, let's get to the game, right? As it had not always been
this way. Kratos had once been a champion of the gods.
I will send you back to the depths of Hades!
The boat section starts with an on-screen prompt. We are in the Aegean Sea. So far so good, but we know this is where we're going to face the Hydra. And the Hydra in Greek myths lives in the lake of Lerna, in the swamps around there. That's where the name comes from, right? The Lernian Hydra. Of course, the game doesn't make it clear if this is the same Hydra, the famous Lernian Hydra. And actually, the books kind of explain that it's not. That there was another Hydra, the one from Lerna itself. And it was killed by Hercules when Kratos was still a child. But as Em said, here we'll only take the game into consideration, and the game makes a mistake by including the Hydra of the sea and gill. Other than that, they did a good job with the creature's characterization. That story about the heads regenerating came a bit later, right? With Euripides. He was the first to describe that ability. Actually, even the number of heads usually varies. The oldest images show 6 heads, but Alcaeus said there were 9, and then Simon just went wild and said there were 50 heads.
As Lucas told you, the number of heads of the Hydra in mythology varies a lot, so it's almost impossible to get her representation wrong in this case. And in the game, from what I counted, there are 7. The only way to get the Hydra's representation wrong, I think, would be to give her just 1 head, because then she'd just be a regular dragon. Except if the head was big. Yeah, anyway, I think that got a little weird now. But moving on, the fight against the Hydra is very well adapted. We have 2 smaller heads, one on the left, one on the right, and the main head is in the middle. And there really is a main head of the Hydra, which is called the Immortal Head. But there are 2 mistakes in this fight. The first is that the smaller heads, after they die, don't regenerate. Because in the story of Hercules, every time he cut off a head, 2 would grow back in its place. He only solved this when he burned the wounds. And the second mistake is about the immortal head, which in this case is immortal. It's impossible to be wounded, And kind of in the game, it dies by being pierced with a piece of wood there. That would never happen. In the story of Hercules, he ends up trapping that middle head under a rock. After killing the Hydra, Kratos finds the guy he hates most in the world, who's hanging from its throat, and kills him for the first time. He ended up killing him multiple times, but despite this, Quintus doesn't hate the guy. It's crazy.
Thank the gods you came back for me!
Right after that, he meets some ladies there and they break the vases. He then talks to Athena. I almost forgot to mention that there are several harpies in the game, and you can kill them easily by pressing the circle button, where you grab them and rip off their wings. In mythology, they are daemones, meaning spirits that represent gusts of wind, and there are only 3 or 2, depending on the version you look at. Their names are Aello, Ocypete, and Seleno.
I have faithfully served the gods for 10 years. When will you relieve me of these nightmares?
We request one final task of you, Kratos. Your greatest challenge awaits.
Well, then later, in the conversation with Athena, Kratos says that he served the gods for 10 years and still couldn't get rid of those nightmares from the past. But there's a curious fact. Kratos' main problem is these memories and horrors that he caused and went through, all because of a god of war, which is Ares. And to solve this, he's working for another goddess of war, which is Athena. Why didn't he seek out Mnemosyne, the goddess of memory, remembrance, and inventor of language and words, instead of working for Athena? She could likely help him with this, since it's Mnemosyne's area of expertise, right? Their conversation continues.
Then the goddess Athena says that Kratos has one last task to do there in the city of Athens, which at that moment was being attacked by Ares. She explains that she can't interfere directly because Zeus forbade the gods from fighting among themselves. It's interesting that the game mentioned this because it was really in Zeus's nature to do this kind of thing. He was aware that a conflict, a fight among the gods, could be catastrophic. It's worth remembering that when the Trojan War began, he forbade the gods from getting directly involved. Only later, thanks to a trick by Hera, did he lift that rule and the gods went all out into the battle. Another cool thing in this conversation is that she tells Kratos that only a mortal who was trained by the gods would be able to defeat Ares, and that immediately made me think of Diomedes, who was a mortal blessed by Athena and actually managed to wound 2 gods, in this case Ares himself and also Aphrodite. And that, my friends, is
For very few. Still, in this same cutscene, it's not very clear why Ares is attacking the city of Athens. It only says that it would be his wish. But we can imagine. It must be because of his rivalry with his sister Athena. After all, both are gods of war. Ares is often humiliated by her, as seen in the Trojan War. It's typical for Ares, then wanting to destroy the city where his sister is the patron goddess. The boat reaches the gates of Athens after the conversation, and Quartus faces several monsters there, including the famous skeleton warriors, who appear throughout the first trilogy. I don't remember if there are beings exactly like these in mythology, but there are. The Spartoi, who were a tribe of warrior men born from the earth, who emerged fully grown and armed for battle from the dragon's teeth sown by Ares. They were such fierce warriors that after a stone was thrown at them, they started fighting each other until only a few remained. But I think, in fact, these zombie warriors in God of War were more of a creative liberty taken by Santa Monica. But it turned out really well. And we keep walking, and we're introduced to the first Minotaurs. One of the best things in the world for me was the Minotaur's finishing animation. Beating him with the circle button was really great. In Greek mythology, there was a single Minotaur, not many. This Minotaur was named Asterius. Born to Pasiphae, wife of King Minos. You likely know his tale. He ended up being imprisoned in a labyrinth, where he devoured and killed several humans until he faced Theseus and died.
Kratos, the gods are pleased with your progress, but your current skills will not be enough to defeat the minions of Ares. I offer you the power to stop your enemies where they stand.
But you must earn this gift. The next relevant meeting for us to discuss is with Aphrodite, since the gods are giving gifts to Kratos so he can face Ares. Poseidon even ended up giving a lightning power to Zeus back on the ship. This title mentioned that part because it makes sense. After all, Poseidon is also a god of storms, but in Aphrodite's case here, it intrigues me a little, because I can't understand why Aphrodite would help Kratos kill Ares. After all, Ares is loved by Aphrodite. In Greek mythology, she even cheats on Hephaestus with Ares. This part of the game here doesn't
make much sense. It really doesn't make sense. And actually, it just gets worse. Look at this. She says she's gonna gift Kratos with the ability to turn his enemies into stone. But for that, he has to rip off Medusa's head first. Guys, if he rips off Medusa's head, he'll automatically have the ability to turn people into stone by using her head, just like Perseus did. He wouldn't need Aphrodite's help for that, not at all. It doesn't make sense for her to give Kratos a power that doesn't even come from her. It comes from the head. Besides, Aphrodite and Medusa have no connection at all in the myths. I really didn't understand why they chose Aphrodite for this part of the game.
Do not fear, Kratos. I am the Oracle of Athens. I'm here to help you defeat Ares. And I will show you how to murder a god.
And after a lot of fighting, the Oracle of Athena appears. She's like a projection and tells Kratos to find her temple where he will supposedly learn how to kill a god. The Greeks had several famous oracles, with the Oracle of Delphi being the most renowned. But I don't remember an oracle in the city of Athens.
The first time we see Ares in the game, he's really huge. Power Rangers villain style, stomping on people. He wears armor and has flaming hair. And let me tell you, I really like this adaptation of Ares. Because even though it's not extremely faithful, it moves away from the usual thing of just representing him as a really powerful warrior. That's his mythological description. A warrior with a shield, helmet, etc. Breaking away from the norm is really cool.
You grow stronger as your journey continues. But if you succeed in your quest, you will need my help. I offer you the power of the greatest of all gods, the father of Olympus. I offer you
the power of Zeus. Then a completely different version of Zeus appears. Different, I mean, compared to the other games, right? Probably at this point in the game, still in the first game, they didn't know it would become a hit, so they hadn't planned anything, right? Only after that, of course, did they choose a different look for Zeus, a more intimidating look than the friendly grandpa who appears here in this part. Anyway, both versions, both this older one and the newer version, are versions of Zeus that don't stray too far from the obvious, right? We'll talk more about that, about Zeus's final look, in the video about God of War 2, which will be released on my channel.
After meeting Zeus, Kratos arrives at the Temple of the Oracle, where after fighting several creatures, he talks to a mysterious gravedigger, which really surprises him, especially since he was digging a random grave in the middle of a huge war. But he reveals that actually this grave was for the bald guy himself. Curiously, he calls Kratos son, and in the future, it's revealed that he is Zeus, which is something very common in mythology. Zeus disguising himself as a human while walking on Earth.
Only one item in the world will allow you to defeat a god. Many of the walls of Athens, hidden by the gods in the desert to the east. Many have gone in search of Pandora's box.
Kratos then enters the temple right after he saves the oracle. They have a brief conversation where she reveals to the bald man that he may be strong, but it's not enough to kill a god. For that, he would need to use an item called the Pandora's box, which in the game is actually a box, and from what I understand, it has never been opened. But in mythology, Pandora's container was opened by Pandora herself, causing all the blessings given by the gods to be lost.
Another strange thing is that the game talks about Pandora's box as if it were a weapon and repeats this all the time, which has no basis at all in Greek myths. It wasn't a weapon, it was actually a container that held all the evils of the world. It was used with bad intentions, sure, but even so, you can't say it was a weapon, right?
It is the most powerful weapon a mortal can wield. With the box, many things become possible. Far across the desert of lost souls.
But anyway, after walking a little, we arrived at the desert of lost souls. That place doesn't exist in Greek mythology. And definitely not near Athens. There's no desert around there, but I guess we can let that slide, right? It's an old game and there was no way for them to make a huge map. So it's okay if one setting has to be right next to the other. I think the novel explains that by putting a greater distance between the city of Athens and the desert of lost souls.
When we enter the desert, we have to face the sirens. And to find them in the middle of all that sand, we have to follow their song. In the game, sirens or mermaids have a humanoid form, but in mythology, they have the form of birds. They were formerly servants of the goddess Persephone, and when she was secretly kidnapped by Hades, Demeter gave them bird bodies so they could help in the search. Since they found nothing, they went to Anthemosa Island. To learn more about sirens, check out my video dedicated to them on this channel. To call Kronos, Kratos blows a horn, which is quite humiliating for him, because Kronos kind of works there like he's cattle being called by a horn. However, the entire story about Kronos and his punishment was fabricated with no basis in actual mythology.
Kronos, the last of the mighty titans, emerged from the desert sands. On his back, Pandora's temple awaited, ready to challenge all who went in search of its guarded treasure. So
Then Kronos appears, and Kratos is shocked to discover that he's still alive. This is the part where we learn more about Zeus's punishment and everything that happened to the Titan after the war. Of course, the story is quite different from the story in Greek myths, right? As I'm telling in my series, Mytholore, Kronos was actually sent to Tartarus along with the other Titans, so it was a shared prison. And Kronos is gigantic, he looks like a mountain, he's so big. The narrator says that Kratos took 3 days to climb, which is just insane. In God of War, the Titans are basically living mountains, right? Stone monsters with rough, almost grotesque features. For sure, that's not how the Greeks imagined the Titans, but it's also not a representation that's too far from reality. The Titans were seen as brute forces of nature, primitive entities that were basically there to stand against the gods of Olympus who came later and were more rational. As if the Titans represented the elemental manifestations, the wild forces of nature that want to dominate everything. So it really was a more primitive idea coming from an earlier stage of evolution before the great gods of Olympus arrived to bring order to things. That's pretty much the idea, right? So it kinda makes sense. Now regarding the size of the Titans, mythologically speaking, they were actually the same size as the gods. proof of that is the vase, the amphora, that depicts the guests at the wedding of Peleus and Tethys. This somewhat monstrous guy you're seeing there is the Titan Oceanus, and he's the same size as all the other gods invited.
You have learned to use the Blades of Chaos well, but they alone will not carry you to the end of your task. I offer you the very blade I used to slay a Titan, and use it to complete your quest.
Inside Pandora's temple, there's a meeting with Artemis, where she gives Kratos a sword, saying she used it to hunt Titans. But in actual mythology, Artemis never fought Titans, at least not in the original version of the story. The most she ever hunted were giants, and there's even a story where she deals with several of them on her own. Then there's a part where Kratos finds two shields, one belonging to Zeus, who really did have a shield, the Aegis, which he even gave to Athena later, but in Hades' case, there's no shield in the stories. Also in this temple, we have a statue of Atlas, which is very similar to a real-world statue, except the one in the game is much cooler, because he just throws the world he's holding. And we have another flashback from Kratos' past, where he faces the army of the barbarian king. I'm unsure which specific barbarian people these are, since Greeks considered anyone not speaking their exact language to be barbarians. Kratos then battles more monsters, performs a sacrifice, and obtains a trident. But these events are not crucial to the story.
The whole part about the Temple of Pandora is a creative liberty taken by the game, since this place doesn't exist in Greek myths. So inside there you have several places dedicated to different gods, and gods that are very different from the ones we would come to know in the series. I mean, look at this statue of Hades, and please explain to me what kind of look is that. For a second I thought it was Buzz Lightyear's father. Although Hades' final look isn't much better than this, right? The guy basically turned into a Silent Hill villain.
Over there in an area dedicated to Hades, the centaurs appear, who are pretty monstrous in the game, but in mythology, they have a more human appearance. Except for the horse part, of course. Although in the stories, most of them are pretty crazy. In fact, this behavior made Heracles kill several of them, but the interesting thing in this part isn't the centaurs. Kratos has to kill enemies in a specific place marked on the ground, reminiscent of sacrifices once made to Hades, involving both humans and animals. That the blood should drip into a specific pit, because they believed that this way the blood would reach the god more easily from the underworld. Kratos then faces a giant armored bull that appears to have robotic parts, or resembles a robot. While this specific bull doesn't exist in mythology, there are automatons like Talos, a living statue created by the blacksmith Hephaestus.
Your progress is impressive, Kratos. But your skills will not carry you to your ultimate goal. The souls of the dead, who stand ready to fight by your mass.
So we get to the meeting between Kratos and Hades. He must have been having a bad breath crisis there. The stench from his mouth is potent. He gives Kratos a soul power, but nothing crucial needs to be mentioned here. Then we finally get to the box, but then Hades realizes that he could kill Kratos. A bit late now, right? Because from what it seems, he could have done that at any time. But he didn't do it before, I don't know why. Anyway, Ares grabs a big log, throws it, and impales Kratos, killing the bald guy and sending him to the underworld. In Greek mythology itself, Kratos' death would be caused by the arrival of Thanatos, who would reap his soul. Then Hermes would take that soul and bring it to Charon, where he would then be taken to the entrance of Hades to receive his judgment. In the game, Kratos' soul falls into the underworld, where he encounters his worst enemy once more, the ship's captain, who died in the Hydra's belly and kills him for the second time.
To return to Earth and complete his quest.
Go, fool! You won't drag me down to that cursed river!
The underworld of Hades here looks much more like hell itself, in this case, Dante's hell. It seems to be a really scary place, made of skin, bones, and everything else. Anyway, Kratos finds a little rope and escapes through the hole dug by the gravedigger. And then he knocks Pandora's box out of Ares' hand, who was way too distracted to notice, right? The guy spotted Kratos from a distance but failed to notice when Kratos knocked the box down. As he opens the box, Kratos absorbs its power, grows giant, and battles Ares. It's obvious that the mythological Ares doesn't have Dr. Octopus-like legs. After defeating Ares, Kratos becomes the new god of war.
By the way, speaking of Pandora's box, let's remember here that it wasn't giant in the myths. Actually, it wasn't even a box, to be honest. The truth is that the correct translation was lost over time. But the so-called Pandora's box, which was a gift from Zeus to humanity, a Greek gift, was actually a glazed ceramic jar that the Greeks called a pythos. And when that jar was opened in the Greek worlds, the evils of the world were released. So it's a very different concept from what happened in God of War. There, it's as if Pandora's box was a divine buffet that put Kratos on equal footing with Ares. That's not in Greek myths, but it's pretty cool, I'll admit to you. Remember that our analysis of God of War 2 will be released on my channel, and maybe after that we'll analyze the whole franchise.
If you've watched up to this point, please like, subscribe, and share this video. Also, remember to subscribe to Lucas's channel. If you think we missed any mistakes, leave a comment. If you want videos about the other games, leave your comments as well. Thanks. See you. Bye.